Welcome to the Words to Live By television broadcast. I'm Bishop Abraham Shanklin Jr. And, let me tell you something. You need to know that we serve an amazing God. I know I shouldn't have to tell you that, but I'm going to tell you. I'm going to remind you that we serve an amazing God. He is simply amazing. He's an amazing God in so many ways. And I just want to bless you with just that word right off the bat. Right off the bat. Jump right in. We serve an amazing God. I serve an amazing God. I hope that you too serve this same amazing God. Let's just for the next 20-some minutes, let's get on one accord and let's come into an agreement. And that agreement, the Bible says that where two touch and agree, a thing happens. So let's just touch and agree. You just touch the television or your mobile device. Let's just touch and agree together that what God is going to deliver to us in these next 20-something minutes is going to make us stronger even in our faith. That in this season, in this culture, in this country, where faith is being examined and tested like never before. And when we come together in agreement, we have an opportunity to connect ourselves in community with people who are going in the same direction that we are going. So I just want to bless you right off the bat and just remind you of how amazing God is. And I want you to stay tuned after the broadcast, so I want to tell you how to get a free gift from me that I would like to send to you. So today's teaching is coming from Romans chapter 12, beginning with the first verse. And Romans 12 is, verse 1 and 2 is very familiar to many people who are students of the Bible. And for those who are not students of the Bible, I invite you to pick up your Bible and read it and become familiar with it again. It's Romans chapter 12. All of Romans is an amazing book, if you will, written by the Apostle Paul. He is one of the later followers of Jesus Christ, one of the later church leaders of Christ after his resurrection. And Paul is responsible for 1/3 of the New Testament writings. 1/3 of the New Testament is is credited directly to him. The meat of his writings would be considered the book of Romans. Romans in Bible circles is considered the Christian Constitution. Just like in America, we have a Constitution, and the Constitution lays out the framework for our rights as citizens of this country. Well, the book of Romans has often been considered the Christian Constitution. It lays the foundation for our rights as followers of Jesus Christ. And so in Romans chapter 12, begin with the first verse, it says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. So that may be familiar to you. And oftentimes the challenge of a Bible teacher, the challenge of a preacher, the challenge of a pastor all across this nation, around the world, is to take an ancient book that such as the Bible that was written over 2,000 years ago and remind you that it is still relevant in our time. And so the challenge is to remind you that an ancient book is relevant. And then once you embrace the idea that it is relevant, then to give you revelation, that is to breathe something fresh out of it. So that's what I hope to do. So Romans chapter 12 says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies, it says, living sacrifice. So he starts off by saying, I beseech you. Now, he's gone through 11 chapters, a total of 16 chapters in the book of Romans. So when you get to chapter 12, you're almost finished with the book. So for 11 chapters, beginning with the first chapter to the 11th chapter, he's been laying some heavy stuff down. I mean, he's been hitting it hard with some strong stuff. from chapter 1, when he talks about I'm not ashamed of the gospel, to chapter 2 and 3, where he's referencing the fact that there's none that really seek after God, to chapter 4, talking about the faith found in Abraham, to chapter 6, talking about the fact that if you've been changed, that your life ought to reflect that, chapter 7 and 8 and 9, going through this journey. And so he lays down some heavy stuff for 11 chapters. So essentially, when we get to chapter 12, and you start the first verse when he says, I beseech you, that I beseech you is based upon everything that you just got out of verse 11 chapters. So out of those 11 chapters, of all that foundational stuff that he laid out, all of that teaching, all of that truth, all of that revelation that he gave, he said, based on all of that, I beseech. Beseech is a nice old archaic word, which means I urge, I plead, I beg you. So based on the 11 chapters of what I gave you, everything from the sacrifice you need to make, referencing Abraham, offering, chapter 11 talks about, his desire for his own countrymen to come to the faith. So he said, based on all of what I have said to you and poured my heart out to you, I beg you that you, brethren, would present your bodies. I beseech you, therefore, I beg you that you present your body as a living sacrifice. Now, the reason why he's pleading, because essentially he could have demanded as an apostolic father, as an apostolic founder of churches all over that region, he could have said, I command you. He could have put the God tag on and says, God commands you. But yet the route that he decided to choose was not one of a command, but one of a petition. I don't want to command you, because if I command you, then you could find a reason to put up resistance. If I command you, you can find a reason to reject what I'm telling you. But he doesn't come by way of a command. He comes by way of an urging. I urge you, based on the fact that Christ is the center of our faith, based on the fact that sacrifice has been made, based on the fact that God's love, based on all of that. So essentially, he goes through 11 chapters to remind us that God, through his son, offered the sacrifice first. So based on the fact that a sacrifice was offered to you, I urge you to make your life now a sacrifice. You get the connection? The connection is, in the first 11 chapters, he goes through and, just brilliantly talk about the fact that God, through his son Jesus, paid the ultimate sacrifice for us. So based on the fact that a sacrifice has been offered to you, he in essence comes and says, now I beg you to make a sacrifice of your own life. Just brilliant. Just simply brilliant. Just really getting underneath the foundation of all of the stuff. He says simply, just plain and simple, a life was sacrificed for you. I'm urging you to show gratitude by offering your life. And he ain't talking about committing suicide. So this is what he says. He says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, by the mercies, right? He says, by the mercies. Now, mercy is God withholding from us what we deserve. That is, mercy is tied to retribution, essentially. It's like when a person goes into the courtroom and throws himself on the mercy of the court. Essentially, what the defendant is asking the judge to show leniency. He's asking the judge to set aside judgment, though it's deserved, though he may have earned it, though she may have, committed the crime to just justifies the punishment. Asking for mercy is pleading to the judge to set aside judgment. That is, show me mercy. I was wrong. I'm guilty. I know I did it. I messed up. I'm asking you to show me leniency. That's what mercy is. And so Paul says then, what I'm begging you to do in the court of heaven, in the presence of God, his angels and other believers, I'm begging you to, by the mercies, that is, God showing you leniency. God has shown all of us leniency. He's shown all of us. In fact, Lamentations 3 says his what? Mercies are new every morning. His mercies, plural. Mercies are new every morning. That means that God every morning shows every last one of us leniency. Every morning. He shows us leniency because his mercies are new every morning. That means the clock is reset every day. And man, I'm going to tell you, if there's one thing that I want to celebrate every morning that my eyes open up in a new day, is the fact that when I open up my eyes, I'm experiencing God's leniency upon my life again. That is, God withholding judgment that no doubt I deserve. You know, I saw someone once, I saw a couple of people had tattooed on their body that says, no one can judge me but God. They had it tattooed. One person had it tattooed across from clavicle to clavicle. Another person had it tattooed from shoulder to shoulder in the back. And the statement was, nobody can judge me but God. That was the statement. And here's the issue. The issue is, what I hope is that they are throwing themselves on the mercy of God, because God judges through his mercy. And so we plead for that mercy. So Paul says, the reason why I'm begging you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, because of the mercies of God. God has withheld from you the judgment that you and I have deserved. I know, man, my goodness, I can't tell you the number of things that my parents withheld from me in terms of judgment that I deserved when I was growing up. Look, I was a good kid, but I had my stuff, and we all have done our stuff growing up. And there are things that our parents, they should have thrown the book at us, but they didn't. There are things that we have done that we should have rightly been judged for. There are things that you have done in relationships that rightly you should have been judged for. So all of us have experienced mercy. Even the worst of us have experienced mercy. A person who has committed a heinous crime by taking the life of another and been sentenced to life in prison is mercy. Because if you follow the old adage, the Old Testament, eye for an eye, then technically by the Old Testament retribution process, if you take a life, your life is ought to be given in exchange. So the fact that they've been given a life sentence instead of a death sentence is even an act of mercy. So all of us have been recipients of God's mercy, every last one of us. I want you to take a moment and think about that. I want you to take a moment and thank God for the mercy that he gave you. Go ahead, you take a moment. I don't have a problem with you breaking in the middle of this teaching to acknowledge to the Father the mercies that he's shown you. Thank you, God, for the mercy. Because I know I've done stuff that qualifies me to receive the full weight of God's judgment. In fact, that's a part of what Romans presents, that all of us stand to receive the full weight of condemnation from God. Yet he chose to show us leniency. He chose to set aside both condemnation and judgment. In fact, one of my life verses is Romans 8, chapter 1, where it says, now therefore there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. There is now therefore no condemnation. That is, I am not condemned through Christ. So for 11 chapters, Paul lays the groundwork that all of us are worthy of judgment, and all of us are worthy of condemnation, and all of us are worthy of the wrath of God. Yet he chose to show us leniency, that's mercy, by the sacrifice of his son. Oh, my goodness. And based on that, he arrives at Romans 12 and says to you that since you have escaped the judgment, the condemnation, and the wrath of God through the sacrifice of his son, then I urge you in gratitude to offer your life as a sacrifice. So that's why he starts off in Romans 12. Man, this is good meat. I'm just telling y'all, this is good meat. Whoever's watching this, your life ain't going to be the same. He says, I therefore, brethren, I beg you by the mercies, that is the leniency that you received through the sacrifice of the son, that you now present your body. But listen, this is how I know he ain't talking about suicide. This is how I know he ain't talking about, human sacrifice. the way they used to do in the old dark age moments and civilizations before that, to appease the gods, they would offer up a pure virgin, human sacrifice. No, he says in Romans 12, I'm begging you by the mercy of God that you present yourself as a living sacrifice. Living is the adjective, living sacrifice. He said you need to present your bodies as a living sacrifice. That's what he says. He says you need to present your bodies a living sacrifice. That is, make your life. This is what he means. Listen to what he says. Make your life count in light of the mercy that you have received. In light of the mercy, do something with that life. Make it a living sacrifice. That is, sacrifice the things of your body that was feeding selfishness, that was self-centered at its core. Sacrifice, a living sacrifice is when you think about what was given up for you, what is the evidence that you've accepted it? What's the evidence of gratitude except you be willing to sacrifice something about you? What are you willing to give up in you that is evidence of gratitude towards a God who showed you leniency? So he says, present your bodies a living sacrifice. And what does it look like? What does the sacrifice look like? What does this living sacrifice look like? He says, holy. That's just a simple word which means set apart. That means live a life that distinctly mark a life of somebody whose gratitude that they've been shown leniency. You don't go before the judge and plead for mercy, and the judge shows you leniency, and then you go right back out there and commit the same crime that you did that put you in hot water in the first place. And that's essentially what Paul is saying. It's almost like the book of Romans is like a legal document. And so it's simply Paul is saying, if you've been shown leniency by God, you don't then take that life that you now have and go back out there and do the same thing you did that you demanded leniency for the first time. So he says your life ought to be one, first of all, that is now holy. Live a life set apart from the behavior and the actions and the thinking of everybody else. You don't think and act and behave like people who are still bound for condemnation and judgment. You live like people who've been given a second chance. Woo! Oh, I hope you're hearing me today. This is powerful teaching. He says holy. That's what it says. Living sacrifice, holy, and this is what it says, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Reasonable. He says holy and acceptable. That is, listen, he's saying clear. This is like base. I'm just base. The base color. The base color of all colors of paint is white. You go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you tell them, hey, I want purple, or I want to paint my room lime green. The base is always white, and then they add the color. The base of all of this is simply this: considering the leniency that God has shown you by offering his son as a sacrifice, the least you can do is live your life that's pleasing to him. You ought to be asking the question, am I making choices that please him with respect to the leniency that he gave me? Holy and acceptable unto God. And he says, it's your reasonable service. You know what reasonable service is? Plain and simple, it's the least you can do. That's all. It's simply, so what does God, watch this, get this teaching now. What does God ask you in exchange for the leniency that he showed you? Leniency, again, is mercy. So what does he ask you in exchange for the mercy he gave you? What does he ask you? That you give him a life that is holy and acceptable to him. That's the least you could do, considering the leniency that he gave you. Considering that according to the 11 chapters prior to chapter 12, considering the fact that you were a candidate for condemnation, you were a candidate for judgment, you are a candidate for the wrath of God, you are a candidate to be eternally separated from. You are a candidate for all of those things, all those sides of God that nobody wants to face. You are a candidate for that. But he showed you leniency through his son, Jesus Christ. The least you can do is to give him a life that shows that you're grateful. You don't go back out there doing the same destructive things that you did before. That's not your life. So I don't have to beat you over the head about don't do this, don't do that, keep this, keep that, follow this rule, follow that law. No. I just want to just simply say, what do you do? What do you do? What do you give to somebody who shows you leniency? You don't do it. You do something with your life. That's essentially all. I mean, I might be oversimplifying this, and maybe my Bible college and seminary professors would be turning their heads like, dude, we gave you all that Bible education and you just break. Look, I'm just trying to make it plain and simple. Plain and simple is take your life and do something with it. Take that life and do something with it. And the best thing you can do with your life is to make it set it apart and make it acceptable unto God. You know what the best thing you do for your life is to give it away. Give your life away. That is, do something for others. Because at the core of who we were is self-centeredness and selfishness. That was the core of who we are. But Christ showed us leniency. God showed us leniency through his son Christ. So the best way you repay God is to do something with your life. That is, to become other-centered. That's what the death of Christ did, was to pave the way so that I can break away out of selfishness to selflessness. And then he says in the second verse, he tells you how to do it. Okay, Bishop, how do I work this out? He says in verse 2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's how you do it. That's exactly how you do it. Don't be conformed to this world, because the world has a type. The world has a type. I was talking to a young lady once, and I said to her, she was single, and she said she wanted to be married. And I said, do you have a type? She said, I have a type. He has to look like this, do this, have this, have this. And so she listed it, type. Well, the world is a type. And the world, by and large, is anti-God. The world is anti-God. That's the type. The world is anti-God. I'm not hating on the world. I'm just telling you, the world is anti-God. And what Paul is saying is, since the world is anti-God, you need to be pro-God. And you need to be pro-God because of the leniency that God showed you. And what does a life look like that's pro-God? Well, I'll tell you what it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like the world. He says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's essentially what it is. Transformed, transfigured. Transform means metamorphosis. You know what metamorphosis look like? Have you ever seen the movie Transformers? That's exactly what it looks like. Transformers is you introduce to this 18-wheeler and find out that it's Optimus Prime. The 18-wheeler is not an 18-wheeler at all. It is this leader of this alien force that has come to the earth. And what Paul says is this: when you've been shown leniency, you repay God by being pro-God, not pro-world. The world is anti-God. And Paul says, when you've been shown the mercy that you've been shown, you don't have no reason to be aligning and siding with the world, because the world is anti-God. So can I invite you to God's side? Can I invite you to become pro-God today? Can I get you to make a decision that you will not follow the pattern of this world? It's anti-God. But follow God, become pro-God. And you can do that because that's the least you can do, considering the God who's shown you leniency. That's what he has. He's shown you leniency. So I need you to walk in that today. Oh, I'm so excited about the opportunity that we can be pro-God and not pro the world. In fact, there's a passage in the book of James that says that he that would be a friend of the world will end up being an enemy of God. So you have to decide. Today is decision day. Are you pro-God? Or are you pro-world? Are you on God's side or are you on the world side? Are you for the word or for the world? Which has shown you more leniency? The word or the world? Which shows you more grace? The word or the world? Which has been more merciful to you? The word or the world? What provides you more hope? The word or the world? Which has shown you more love unconditionally? The word or the world? You get to choose today. And I am going to choose pro-word. I'm choosing God. I want to encourage you to choose God today. Why don't you write me today? I want to send you, for everybody who taps me at my email at bishop@altarforlife.org, will get a free gift, a book that I have written entitled Transforming Your Faith. I want to send that out to you. If you would just send me an email at bishop@altarforlife.org. It's flashing at the bottom of the screen. That's bishop@altarforlife.org, and get that free gift, Transforming Your Faith. I want your faith to go to another level. Choose today, word or world. But as for me and my house, we are going to choose the word. I bless you today in the name of Jesus Christ, and walk in the glorious mercies, guess what, that are new every morning. Until next week, I'm Bishop Abraham Shanklin Jr. God bless you.